Hey everybody, it's March 23rd of 2025, and we're looking at chapter 33, Africa, the Middle East, and Asia in the era of independence. So a lot of different topics to go over, and so let's just go ahead and hit this, right? Let's see. The crux of this chapter, so for those of you who have not yet read the chapter, here's the short version. Colonization is great for the mother country, right? Is great for the mercantilist countries, great for Great Britain and Germany and France and the United States. They're loving it. But the colonized countries, not so much. Well, that's pretty much the entire chapter right there. Turns out that economic mercantilism, where the mother country, let's see, you remember this one, this is mercantilism, so that's where the colonies, they send all the raw materials to the mother country, for example Britain, and then Britain turns it into goods that they then sell back to the colonies for exorbitant prices. Yeah. So that's that. That's not good for the colonies. Specifically Africa, let's just say it out loud, specifically Africa, specifically for the Middle East. And there you go. And then political systems. You know, political systems don't necessarily work. You know, democracy. You look at democracy and you think, hey, democracy is great. Well, yeah, from our point of view, democracy is great. But there are other countries around the world that think, maybe not so much. And so, for example, the theocracies and the monarchies and all those different, right? And so in the United States, we look at that and say, theocracy, we don't want to be governed by the church, and we don't want to be governed by a king, but there are places in the world that do. And so when the mother countries are trying to force their will onto, that's not going to work out very well either. And then obviously religion, right? The mother countries, generally Christian, and then going into countries that are not generally Christian. And so that's going to cause some issues as well, right? And so here, I kind of like this this political cartoon. It's got Europe and North America, and it's just covered with it appears rubble from, actually that would be representing natural resources, right? And they just gouged out Africa. And it's not just the United States, but it's Europe as well. And then over here we've got this guy, he's kicking off the top part of the autocracy, and people are looks like they're running to the pyramid, and this group is the theocracy, government by the church, and democracy, theoretically government by the people. Theoretically. All right. Our book in chapter 33 talks about population explosion, right? The population explosion specifically in the third world. This chart over here is kind of interesting how they do these kind of charts when you see that dotted line right there, that dotted line, and it suggests that the chart makers are too lazy. And so what that means is that dotted line, if you look at the bottom, it says, I know you can't read it here, but when you see the PowerPoint, you'll see it up close and personal. It says 2.5 million years ago, and then you see the dotted line that says 7,000 years ago. So there's a huge jump in time. But you can see there's not very many people on the planet. And there at the bottom, less than 1 billion people, less than 1 million people. I mean, not very many people at all. And this pretty much stays the same, 6,000, 5,000, 4,000, 3,000, 2,000, 1,000 years ago. It's starting to get a little bigger, a little bigger. Jesus is born in AD. AD stands for in the year of our Lord. And then you get 1,000 AD, and we get a little bit of a jump there, and then a little bit of a dip, and it says the Black Death. So what was that, 1347? And then 2025, blam, right? Shoots way up like that. So, and now we're sitting, I guess I could look it up, but we're close to like 9 billion people right now. It's a lot of people. And so our book talks about the third world are the countries that are increasing the most when it comes to population. And of course then we run into the old Malthusian trap. You guys remember we were talking about the Malthusian trap? The wolves and the rabbits. And when you have a whole bunch of rabbits and the wolves come out and they feed, but then they eat all the rabbits and there's no more rabbits, and so then the wolves die off. And when the wolves die off because they're hungry, because there's no rabbits, because they ate all the rabbits, when the wolves die off, then there's more rabbits because there's less wolves to hunt them, and so then there's a whole bunch of rabbits are being born, and when there's a whole bunch of rabbits being born, now the wolves can come back, and it goes, the cycle goes and goes and goes and goes and goes. That works for human beings as well, and so I think we've talked about that. Surely we have. Malthusian economics. This is the population pyramid of the United States in 2020. And so population pyramids are pretty easy to read. You guys have seen these before. It looks like for this one, the males are on the left, the females are on the right. And so the kids are at the bottom and the older people are at the top. And you're looking at percentage of the population. And so the 10 to 14 year olds, you guys would be the 15 to 19 year olds. And so males on that side and females on this side. And you see as we get higher and higher and higher, there's fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer. And finally the top of this chart has 85 plus. And you see that there's not very many people 85 plus. But you do see that there's more females than there are males 85 plus. That's because us guys, we can't handle it anymore. We die off earlier than the women. No pressure. But see how that tapers? It's a nice taper. It's a nice taper. So there's more kids, and then you got the adults, and then okay. That's the world. Then you look at the United States, and I know the chart looks like fat. Not because the United States is fat, but it is what it is. So in the last one they did it by percentages. For this one they're doing it by millions of people. So here at the bottom, 0 to 4 years old, we've got a female on the right and a male on the left. And you see a little over 9 million, closer to 10 million females who are 0 to 4. And a little bit, actually a little higher, because boys. And then you go up, right? And then you see a couple of weird bulges. That bulge right there, so this is 50, basically 60 years old to 40 years old. There's that bulge right there. That is Generation X, the best generation. Hair bands and, you know, early, well, I guess it'd be middle Michael Jackson. Not early Michael Jackson, late Michael. The 80s, that 80 generation right there. The X generation, and then you see, then there's a little bit of a dip in there, and then here's the Y generation, And so you guys, at the time of this video, you guys are sitting there at the back end of the Y generation. I know you also have different names for it. So many different names for it. And then the next generation is just now coming out. That's in 2010, and so everything's kind of shifted up because this is now 2025. All right. So that's the United States. If you look at the far left, that's Nigeria, right? So over in Africa, third world country, Nigeria, and you see their population pyramid actually kind of looks like a pyramid, right? At the very bottom, you have a whole bunch of little bitty kids, and then it's a kind of a, right? And so lifespan in Nigeria, not as long as the lifespan in the United States, it appears. Then you have, next to that, you have Morocco. So Morocco has that bulge again. There's the Generation X and Generation Y bulge there. And so then, so they're coming up. And here's the United States again, the United States. And you see that our pyramid, even though they're all the same height, but you can see that there's more people towards the top. That says that we have a longer lifespan in the United States. And you get to Japan. And Japan's a little weird, right? You look at its shape. It has way more people at the top. And in fact, if you look at the top is fatter than the bottom, which tells us that Japan is actually losing population. So there you go. Interesting how population pyramids look. You can find a lot of weird population pyramids in the world. Like they're on the left. That's the United Arab Emirates over there in the Middle East. Arguably the richest country per capita, right? And you see what is odd about that. There's way more guys than there are gals in that country, especially between the ages of 29 and 40. Wow, there's a lot more guys than there are gals. I'm sure there's reasons for that. What could there be? Why would there be? And then we get Gainesville, Florida. Gainesville, Florida. This is the population pyramid for Gainesville, Florida. And you look at it and you're thinking, what is going on there? From 20 to 24, what is going on? Why is there a huge explosion? Really from 15, that's a pretty big one. From 20 to 24, what's going on in Gainesville, Florida? And you're thinking about it. You got it, you got it. You know why that population pyramid is like that. You got it. Gainesville, Florida. That would be the University of Florida, the Florida Gators. And so the University of Florida is in Gainesville, and so you see that they have a big population there at the university, and that kind of skews that data. I'm sure if we were to look at Stillwater, Oklahoma, or Norman, Oklahoma, or Chickasha with USAO down there, or even Edmond, Oklahoma, they would have population pyramids that kind of look like that. All right, let's move on from the population pyramids. India and Pakistan. All right, here we go. In 1947, so this is all post World War II. India was a, words would be good here. India was a colony of Britain. And so we had the Gandhi and the independence movement. Remember we talked about that 2-3 weeks ago. And so the British, they're looking at the map and they're like, wow, we've got a situation in India where we have a whole bunch of Hindus and a whole bunch of Muslims. And they are not really gelling together here. And so Britain decided they were going to fix the problem by creating two nations, the two-nation solution, the two-nation state solution. And so they're going to create Pakistan and India. Pakistan is going to be the Muslim country, and India is going to be the mostly Hindu country. And so they're going to basically slice off part of India and call that West Pakistan. And then in an interesting political move, they're going to also slice off the far end on this side, and they're going to call that East Pakistan over there. And so we're going to have two Pakistans. I know, this makes no sense. But don't worry, it'll all fall apart in just a second. So we have East Pakistan and West Pakistan and India. And so actually the Indian government, the British government said, you know, we're going to draw these lines, and this is going to be the Muslim state, this is going to be the Hindu state, and none of you have to move. You can be cool, you can stay where you are, but then obviously people are like, no. If the Muslims want to go live in Pakistan and the Hindus want to go live in India, so there's a huge crossing. Like 10 million people decide to pack up and move across the lines. But the Indian government didn't enforce that, except for this little area right up here called Punjabi, and the Indian government actually said, yeah, we're going to force people who are Hindu and or Sikh, and we're going to kick you guys out, and that caused some problems. That caused some problems. We're going to forcibly remove people because of their religion. Yeah, that wasn't good. Let's see. So East Pakistan and West Pakistan, they're actually separated by 1,000 miles, which is kind of weird. They are going to have a civil war eventually. Like in, you think I'd know this number? I don't know, like 55, 56, 1955, somewhere around there. And East Pakistan is going to bully West Pakistan, and East Pakistan ultimately they're going to sign a peace treaty, and they're going to separate countries, and East Pakistan is going to become Bangladesh, and Bangladesh is what the eighth most populous country in the world. Little bitty Bangladesh, the eighth most India being number 1, right? And China being number 2, the United States being number 3, Bangladesh being number 8. You thought I was going to list all the others, didn't you? I'm not going to. Okay. Gandhi. That's right, you're going to have to know 2 different Gandhis. They are not related. I mean, because you know, all the Joneses, they're all related, and all the Johnsons are all related, and all the Greens are all related, and all the Smiths are all related. Nope, that is not true. And neither are the two Gandhis. And so we've talked about the first guy, and this is Indira. And so Indira is going to be elected as president. Do I have the date of this? Prime Minister, I'm sorry. Prime Minister in 1966, and she's going to be Prime Minister for a little bit over a decade, and then they're going to kind of kick her out, and then she's going to come back for another 4 or 5 years. And so she was elected. She was voted as. Let's go with voted as. She was voted as the BBC, the British Broadcasting Company, the BBC. They voted her as the female leader of the century, and then in the 20th century, the female leader over Margaret Thatcher of the United Kingdom. So anyway, she's a very powerful lady, and let's use the word ruthless, right? Ruthless. She's very powerful, and she's going to use her power to smack around some people. Sometimes not so good. Not so good. She's Hindu, and so she's not going to play nice with the Muslims, and definitely not going to play nice with the Sikhs, the Sikh religion. And so, in fact, the Sikh religion, she's going to up there in Punjabi, the Sikhs have a couple of temples up there, and Indira is going to tell them that they have to leave their temples. And of course they say no, and then she sends in the military, and things get out of hand. Different sides, different stories, right? The Sikhs say, well, we would have left if you had been a little nicer, and you didn't attack us on a religious holy day, that you knew that there were going to be civilians in the temple. And Indira's response was, well, we told you to leave, and so you didn't. And so there were lots and lots of deaths involved that. But anyway, Indira is going to, people are going to call her Mother Indira, kind of like Mother India. See how that worked out? Mother India, Mother Indira. That's pretty slick. And she's going to bring India into power. People are going to start looking at India and go, ooh, India. Okay, so good for India, right? Actually, she was assassinated. Turns out that when you kill a whole bunch of Sikhs because of their religion, and then you decide to keep your bodyguards around who are also Sikhs, well, that wasn't a very smart move. And so 2 of her bodyguards who were Sikh assassinated her. Do you want to say anything else about that? No, I think that's all I want to say about that. Okay. Okay, so after we saw this after World War One, and well, here it is, Africa 1914. And so after World War One, there's a reminder that basically Europe and the world, but basically Europe, they drew the boundaries of the new states, the new countries of Africa. And so if you look at the map, they're all the pretty colors, right? You have red is French, and blue is British, and purple is, right? So red, French West Africa, and purple, the Spanish, they get Western Sahara over here, and it looks like the British kind of get the Nile River, and then down here in South Africa and Nigeria, and then the Portuguese get the edges there. I remember the whole, right? Portugal, Spain, the Treaty of Tordesillas, right? The Belgian Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo right there. German are in green, Italian. Italy gets Libya, it looks like Somalia and Eritrea. And then, oh, French, hey! The French claim Djibouti. What's the capital of Djibouti? That's right. And then, let's see, everybody else is independent. And so independent, you have, well, I was about to point out that, but that's a lake. That's Ethiopia, Why is Ethiopia independent? Because they are, looking at that chart, that map in 1914, Ethiopia is the biggest Christian nation in Africa. So they're independent, Coptic Christian. And then the next biggest country that's independent right there is Liberia. And we know that Liberia was formed as a colony, a U.S. colony we're going to learn this next year in AP U.S. history, where some people in the 1830s said, hey, here's a good idea. Let's take slaves, African slaves, and let's ship them back to Africa. That movement fell apart because it was a terrible idea. But we call that country Liberia, Liberia, and the capital is named after the president at the time. That would be, well, his idea. It was James Monroe, so the capital is Monrovia. And I used to know something weird about, it is what it is. Okay, so, where was I going with that? In 1914, the Europeans are going to draw all of these lines, and frankly, they don't care where the lines go. You look at the United States of America, and especially on the east side. So we say on the Mississippi, if you take the Mississippi and go to the right, to the east side of Mississippi, a lot of those states, there's boundaries. You kind of see the rivers, like there in Kentucky and Ohio. You see the rivers there, and those kind of form the boundaries. And then you come over to the west side of the United States, and they're just like these square blocks, right? Wyoming and Colorado and Kansas. I mean, they're just like these weird, just block shapes, right? So who decided where to draw the line? Oh, right, exactly. And so here, the Europeans, they just kind of started drawing random lines, not necessarily random, but kind of random. And some of these lines went right through like villages. And so half of the village would be French and half the village would be German. Does German and France touch? Yeah, see, right there it touches, right there. Also, it looks like Togo or Benin. And so they draw them right through the middle of these villages or through these civilizations, and it makes no sense, right? And then, not only on top of that, so you have your separating groups, but then you're also putting groups together. Like here we have French West Africa, and you look how large that area is, and there's like, I don't know, probably 1,000 different languages of different tribes who live in those areas. We're going to put them all together and say, hey, by the way, you're all one giant country. See, this makes no sense. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. Welcome to world history. And because of that, because of tearing people apart and or putting random people together, we're going to cause problems. So, for example, we have in the 1980s, 1990s, we have down here in Rwanda, we have the Hutus and the Tutsis, and they were put together. And the Hutus and the Tutsis did not like each other. I'm pretty sure they still don't like each other. They did not like each other, and we had a genocide down there, which means one group basically annihilated the other group. Yeah, it's not good. But it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Ugh. Right, here's a reminder, the United Nations. United Nations, the picture on the right side, that's the General Assembly room, and that's where every single country gets a vote. One vote, everybody is equal, so the most powerful country in the world, the United States of America, and some of the really small countries you never heard of, Kiribati, Tuvalu, East Timor, Eswatini, little bitty countries you've never heard of, they also only have one vote. And so two little bitty islands out in the middle of nowhere can outvote the United States of America. That's in the General Assembly. And so we've talked about this before. On the left side, we have the Security Council. The Security Council, that's 15 countries. I don't think we've covered this. There's 15 countries. 5 of them are permanent. 10 of them are rotating. And so Europe gets 2, and Asia gets 2, and Africa gets 2, and South America gets 2, and North America gets 2. And then there's 2 that are at large, so that gives you your 10, and then the other 5 are permanent. And so the 5 permanent countries are the United States, France, Great Britain, China, and Russia. Originally the Soviet Union. We've talked about that, right? Okay. And China, the People's Republic of China, not the Republic of China. The People's Republic of China, not the Republic of China. I think that's in next week's video. And so the Security Council, they're the ones who can actually send troops and can make some decisions about dropping the hammer on things. And the rule is in the Security Council. The rule is in the General Assembly. It's a majority vote. The rule is in the Security Council. It's also majority vote, but caveat. But all 5 of the permanent members, France, United Kingdom, United States, China, Russia, all 5 have to vote yes for it to pass. If one of them votes no, then it doesn't pass. And so you can have a vote of 14-1, and if France votes no, then the measure doesn't pass. So the United States votes no. And there you go. Does that ever happen? Yeah, it does happen. So it's interesting. I did this PowerPoint. I chose these pictures for this PowerPoint. Now, I've changed up a little bit, but I chose these pictures about 7 years ago, when I first put this PowerPoint together. And again, I've added to and subtracted from. But it's kind of interesting to me that here we are, that I chose these particular cartoons 7 years ago, and they're relevant like today, right? And so here's Iran, and he's obviously pumping iron. He says, we're going to go ahead with our nuclear power program. We'll probably also go ahead with our plan to enrich the spent fuel. Any problem? And the United Nations down here with this little people, he goes, no, because the perception is the United Nations has no power over Iran. And so here we are in the year 2025, and Iran and nuclear power and President Trump and United Nations, and wow, it's all like full circle. And here we have a cartoon here, and it looks like a bunch of British guys and United Nations guys. What? Enforce our rules? That's extreme. That would imply we have to do something. Shouldn't we just stand here and it's what we do best, see? And so the implication is that the United Nations has no power, like physical power, unless it's backed by the United States and or other big countries. Again, kind of interesting that I picked these cartoons 7 years ago. And here we have the United Nations, and it's got a flag, an Israeli flag there in front of the United Nations building, with these guys out here with guns, and it says Palestinian membership not allowed. That's right. Hey everybody, the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization of Palestine, does not have a vote in the United Nations. They are a non-voting but speaking, so they can stand up and they can talk, but they don't get to vote. This is in the year 2025. And so the United Nations there. And wow, is this not up to date? Goodness gracious. So here we have Israel and we have Hamas. And it looks like they are playing tennis. They're playing tennis, and the tennis ball looks like some sort of bomb, and it looks like they're right. And the United Nations guys over here says net. And of course, the net is civilians. And in tennis on the serve, if you hit the serve, and you guys know this, right? You're all tennis players. Right. If you hit the ball and it hits the net and it goes over, we call that a let. If the bomb hits the net, ooh, that's not good, right? And it's kind of interesting we're still talking about this today. In fact, it's even crazier. Speaking of, So, last time we talked about Israel 3 weeks ago, we were talking about, we were talking about it, good, we just quick. The diaspora, so just a couple of your vocabulary words, right? The diaspora is when the Jews, they all over the world, they went to all the different places in the world because they kept getting kicked out and kicked out and kicked out and kicked out. And then in 1945 and 1948, and then Britain said, hey, we had the Balfour Declaration after World War I, but then here we have World War II, and now we're going to form the state of Israel. And that was 1948. And so now the Jews are going to come back, and we're going to form the country of Israel, and they're going to be Israelis. All right. And so a whole bunch of people are not very happy about that, specifically the people who lived there, right? Who lived there. And so here's Jerusalem. And so we're going to have a situation. And so the Muslim countries, and see Israel, Jewish country, Egypt is Muslim, and Jordan is Muslim, and Syria is Muslim, and Lebanon is Muslim, and Iraq and Iran, and surrounded by Muslim countries. In 1967, well, this is when the actual war happened, but the short version here is that the Muslim countries were, well, for lack of better terms, were picking on Israel and saying, like, for example, like, no, you can't use your ships. Your ships can't go through the Suez Canal, and petty stuff. And then at one point, Egypt says, hey, you know what? Oh gosh, I wish I had a better map. So on the left, okay, so the Red Sea. It's really kind of hard to explain this. But on the right side, on the east side of the Sinai Peninsula, Israel actually touches kind of like the Red Sea down here, not very much, and Egypt decided to block that off at the Strait of, it starts with a T, the Strait of starts with a T. Come on, I can do this. The Strait of, anyway, there's a strait down there, and the Egyptians blocked them, and Israel said, hey, you're going to let our ships through, and Egypt said, no, we're not going to let your ships through, and Israel said, you're going to let our ships through, and Egypt said, we're not going to do that. And so, since Egypt was bullying them, Israel decided to take it upon themselves, and they launched some planes and quickly destroyed a whole bunch of Egypt's military force. Well, there you go. And so then Egypt decided, well, we're not going to take that. So then Egypt invaded Israel. And then as Egypt and Israel are getting into it, Jordan is going to take some advantage, and they're going to start to move in here. And then Lebanon and Syria, they're going to move in also. And so and then Iraq, which is way down here, so we've got 4 big countries, and a little bit of Lebanon, are going to jump on Israel. And we call this the 6-Day War. And so after the 6 days of all these pretty good sized countries jumping on little bitty Israel, Israel actually expanded its nation. And so Israel took the Gaza Strip from Egypt, and they took the West Bank from Jordan, and they took the Golan Heights from Syria. And we're still talking about this stuff today, guys. That happened in 1967, and we're talking about the war, right? And the Gaza Strip with Hamas, and right? It's still going on, this stuff. But there's the Gaza Strip. All right. And so, another vocabulary word for you to kind of put in the back of your head, intifada. So intifada is an Arabic word which basically means the rebellion or the uprising. And so, in world history, we can use it in a lot of different places where there was an intifada, a rebellion. But generally, if you're talking about the intifada, capital I, then we're talking about specifically the Palestinians' rebellion against the Israeli government. And so we would say Hamas right now. Okay, anything else I want to say about that? Again, I know a lot of that we've already kind of talked about, but This was in the chapter, so there you go. Interesting cartoons. We've got, so some of these cartoons, so all right, so we have pro-Israeli cartoons, pro-Palestine cartoons, kind of like the United States where we have pro-Democrat, pro-Republican, right? And so here we have little bitty Israel right there in the big bad Arabic countries, and they're smash little bitty Israel. And here we have Israel, and we've got the different countries, and they've got their tanks, and they're going to blow up poor Israel. And then here we have, it's kind of interesting. We've got the president of Israel and the leader of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and they are wearing the same pants. And one guy's lighting the TNT, the other guy's got the gun, and it's just kind of weird. All right, so here's an interesting little book. It's written by Kishan Dosh, The Story of the Six-Day War in Word and Cartoon. And so the title of the book, So Sorry We Won. That's kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting. All right, and then you have pro-Palestine cartoons, right? And so in 1960, not that the others were pro-Palestine, no, I think most of these pro-Palestine. In 1967, the 40-year myth, right? So the idea that little bitty Israel got jumped on by these big countries, and they won. And so here we have the heroic Israelites, right? And so and the giant Arab aggression, and clearly because you all paid attention in Sunday school, you recognize this is David, and he's smacking Goliath in the head with the rock, which is also an Israeli story right from, the Old Testament. And so that was the big story. And then, so that's definitely the Israeli version. But then we have the Palestinian version. The Palestinian version is down here. The Palestinian version says, this is what really happened. You have David, who represents Israel, and says, the United States funded Israeli power because we gave them money, and we may have given them planes and bombs and guns, and we're going to drop the little bitty slingshot rock, which is now this huge boulder, and it says planned land grab, that Israel did this on purpose. Okay, different interpretations, right? All right, new topic. This is a new topic. All right, so the guy on the far left, that's the Shah. And so Reza Pahlavi, we call him the Shah. And he's the king of Iran. And so he's going to be the king of Iran, really basically from World War II up to the late 1970s. And he's going to bring Iran into, basically, he's going to try to pull Iran out of the third world. He's going to push them, he's going to try to make Iran a first world country. And so he's going to improve their military. He's going to push education on everybody. He's going to try to push more women's rights. He's going to try to push industry. And so the Shah. And so the United States, we looked at this, we looked at Iran, we looked at the Shah, and we were like, hey, one, this is good because he's kind of bringing in a little democracy there, so all right, that's great. Two, he's got a ton of oil because the OPEC country, he's got a ton of oil over there in Iran. If we can be nice, we can be nice, then maybe we can help each other out a little bit. And so the United States, we're kind of pro-Shah, right? And then we have the other leader in Iran, and this is the Ayatollah. And so Ayatollah is, we would say, the priest, or actually like the bishop, not really the pope, although it's pretty close, but the Catholic Church, like the archbishop. Yeah, let's go with that. The archbishop. So the Ayatollah, he's a leader, and he's way up there in the list. And so his last name is Khomeini. And so the Ayatollah Khomeini, and he's the leader of the Islamic Church in Iran, and he's not very pleased with the Shah. And so he thinks the Shah is going against some of the Muslim teachings, and so he's going to organize a little Iranian revolution. Okay, so that's the background story. Oh, and then we got President Carter of the United States of America. And we'll get to him in a second. So the short version here is Iran is about to go helter-skelter. The Shah contracts cancer, lymphatic cancer. So Iran, and he doesn't want to appear weak. He's got to go through treatment, right? He doesn't want to appear weak, and so the Shah, he's very outgoing. He's very charismatic. He likes to be on TV. He likes to be out there and give speeches. But while he's going through treatments, he's very weak, and it's not very good for him. And so he becomes reckless. He becomes a hermit, and people are like, "What's going on? What's going on? What's going on with the president?" And so then the Ayatollah is like, "Well, no, we need a new guy, and it should be me." And then the Shah, he gets sicker and sicker, and then there's some doctoring of photos with regard to people holding them up, and maybe they look like dogs now, and it's just kind of weird stories. But he decides that he has to get better treatment, and so he's going to leave Iran. The Shah, the president, the Shah is going to leave Iran. Excuse me. And so he's going to go to Egypt. And so he's going to go to Egypt, and then Egypt can't really help him out. So then he flies to, and I didn't memorize all these, but he goes to a lot of different places. And he flies to Morocco, and then Morocco's like, no, this isn't cool, because now the Ayatollah has found out where you are, and this isn't really cool. And so then the Shah flies to Mexico. And so he goes to Mexico, and he talks, and the doctors are like, "Oh, you're very sick. What is wrong with you?" And then the Shah doesn't tell them that he has cancer. And so they think that he has malaria. So the story gets crazy. So then they give him malaria drugs, which actually cause him to be worse. And so then he's like, "All right, well, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I'm going to go to the United States." And President Carter's like, "No, no, we're not going to do this. Good luck, but no, we don't want you here." And so Carter's thinking, well, if we accept him, then that's going to be bad, because right now this guy, the Ayatollah, he's already talking smack about the United States, and if we accept the Shah into our country, then the Muslims in Iran are going to be very anti-United States. So President Carter says no. And so the Shah, he flies to like Panama, and then like the Bahamas, but then eventually he's going to fly to the United States, and he's going to get treatment here in the United States. And so the plan was, Carter's plan was, actually, it's kind of interesting. I know I'm kind of rambling here, but Carter eventually capitulated to allowing the Shah to come in, because Carter's a Democrat, and Carter was doing a treaty, a nuclear weapons treaty called SALT II. Did we cover that? That might be in the next chapter. SALT II with the Soviet Union, with the Russians, and a Republican by the name of Kissinger said, "I'm not going to help you pass this treaty, get this treaty signed, unless you allow the Shah to come in." So Carter eventually allowed him to come in, because he didn't want to irritate the Russians. It's a whole crazy story. But anyway, the Shah comes in. He's only going to be here for a couple of days. Turns out it's going to be 6 weeks. And the whole time, the Ayatollah is just screaming at us. And this is unfortunate. All right, so then the Shah, he leaves the United States, and he flies back to Mexico, and he flies back to Panama, and then he goes to Bahamas. He goes to France at one point. He flies to Egypt again. He flies to Morocco again. He flies to Switzerland again. He comes back to the United States. He flies back to Egypt. It's a crazy story. He never actually gets back to Iran. And then ultimately then he dies. And so when he's dead, there's a vacuum of power. Well, there's no vacuum of power. The Ayatollah is going to take over. And so we're going to go from a monarchy, the Shah kind of being a monarch, to a theocracy. a dictatorial theocracy. Theocracy means government by the church, and or by the mosque, as the case may be, and the Ayatollah is going to take over. So the Iranian Revolution. Okay, here's where it gets crazy, because it hasn't been crazy yet. On November 4th, 1979, we have, in the different countries around the world, we have diplomats, right? And generally we have them in the capital cities. We have embassies. It's kind of interesting how it works. The United States, we have embassies from a lot of countries that are here in the United States. A lot of them in Washington, D.C., many of them in New York City. And an embassy is kind of interesting because technically the ground that the embassy is on is part of the country that claims the building. So, like, for example, if France has an embassy in Washington, D.C., well, that house or that building or that apartment is technically French territory. Same thing for the United States. Around the world, we have embassies all around the world, and so that's United States territory. That's kind of how that works. So we had a embassy in Iran and in 1979 it was in Tehran, which is the capital of Iran. And on November 4th, 1979, a whole bunch of demonstrators that were very anti-United States for various reasons. A lot of student-led protests. They're coming up to the main gates, and we've got our guys, our Marines, and they're inside the gates with their M16s, and the students are getting closer and closer to the gates, and the Marines are like, "Hey, now back off," and the students are getting closer and closer, and then some of the students they start throwing stuff through the gates, which throwing stuff at Marines with M16s. And so then some of the students are starting to climb up over the fence, and so the Marines they call into the building. They're like, "Hey, we're about to be invaded. You want us to start shooting?" And so then the ambassador inside the building says, "Okay, well, wait. Let me get clearance from the big dog." So he calls over to the United States. The United States is like, No. If you start shooting students, if you start shooting Iranian students, this could go really, really badly. And so at that point, it didn't matter at that point because the students had already basically broken in through the gate. And it turns out some of them weren't students, that they were actually part of the Iranian military. And they came in and they captured a whole bunch of Americans, ultimately keeping 53 hostages. They allowed a couple of them to go. I think there's a pregnant lady and an older person. But the point is they kept 53 hostages. And that made huge news. 53 American hostages were taken prisoner, right? And so President Carter's like, "Whoa, you have to give them back." United States, whoa. The Ayatollah Khomeini, he names the United States. He says, "I'm not going to talk about the United States anymore. He's going to call us the Great Satan." That's going to be our new cool nickname, the Great Satan. And he says, we're not going to give you back your American hostages. Yeah. Carter decides he's going to send in black ops. We've got a couple of pretty good sized boats out there in the water, and we're going to fly in some helicopters at night, and the rescue attempt actually goes terribly. We lose a helicopter. We lose 8 American Marines or SEALs, or anyway, the elite forces. We lose 8 of them. Oh my goodness, it was a crazy thing. And of course, as soon as the helicopter goes down and the American elite forces are killed, that just revs up the Iranian Revolution, revs up the Ayatollah, and it's just, it gets out of hand. And of course, that's a black mark on the United States of America and President Carter. And oh my goodness, oh my goodness. Okay. So, I think ultimately the Ayatollah realized that his position of holding 53 Americans was going to get tenuous, because ultimately we're a much bigger and badder country than he is. And so the problem is he can't give up the hostages without losing face, right? And he can't give them to Carter. So they make a really interesting deal that he will release the hostages after a treaty is signed, but not to Carter. He waited until President Reagan put his hand, the upcoming President Reagan, right after Carter, President Reagan put his hand on the Bible and said, "I swear to be the best president," etc., and uphold the Constitution. And then like 2 hours later, the hostages were freed. And so the Ayatollah did not free them to Carter, he freed them to Reagan. And so everybody was happy, and there you go. And basically at that point, Iran became pretty high on our non-friend list. Yeah. Wow. What's next? Oh, right there, yeah. They're free. A new beginning as Ronald Reagan becomes President of the United States. Check that out. Ronald Reagan becomes the President of the United States, but he's actually the second story on the newspaper. The first story on the newspaper is that the hostages were freed in 444 days later. Yep, I remember that. And there they are getting off the airplane and waving at us, and well, I remember that. I was in third grade. Yep. Okay, we're almost done here. So a year later, Iran and Iraq are going to get into it. And so Iraq, the president of Iraq at the time, his name is Saddam Hussein, and he decides, he's watching the whole thing, and he's like, wow, you know, Iran, they are so discombobulated right now, kind of like this PowerPoint. They're so discombobulated right now that we're going to take advantage. And so Iraq attacks Iran. And so Iraq, the Sunni Muslims and the Iranians, the Shia Muslims, remember when we talked about the difference between those, the Sunni and the Shia, and so they're going to go to war. And so this is going to be an 8-year war. They still don't like each other in the year 2025. The 8-year war, and Iraq is going to be the aggressor early. And it's kind of interesting, you know, hindsight being 2020. The United States, we're looking at that war going, okay, so we got a guy who hates Iran, but his name is Saddam Hussein, and he's going, if he's going to help smack around the Ayatollah, maybe we give this guy in Iraq, maybe we give him some weapons, maybe we give him some ammunition, maybe we give him some stuff, maybe we give him some, you know, intelligence, maybe we give him, hindsight being 2020, right? Those of you who've read ahead in your books. Yeah, right. Okay. Right. I'm not going to spoil it. But anyway, so we're going to help out Saddam Hussein a little bit against, we're talking about the United States, against Iran. And then ultimately Iran, well, they're just bigger. And so they're going to punch back. And so the two of them are going to wrestle. And there you go. And in United Nations Resolution 598, we're going to have a ceasefire, and we're going to go back to our pre-war boundaries, or the pre-war map. So kind of like the War of 1812, where nothing changed. All right. Last slide. This is just a reminder. We've already talked about this in class, apartheid. We've already talked about that. Remember, South Africa, very, 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 very racist, right? We talked about that. The white government, we call it the apartheid government, and so this is in chapter 33 in your book, and so this just a reminder of all that. And remember, that when in the United Nations, remember there was the vote, and all the countries in the world voted to censor, to condemn South Africa for its incredibly racist policies, except for 3 countries. Remember, South Africa didn't vote for that. And then Israel didn't vote for that for various reasons. We've already talked about that. And then who was the 3rd country? Who was the 3rd country, right? That's right. But that country didn't vote yes or no. They voted, do you remember the word? Do you remember the word? Starts with an A, starts with an A, and rhymes with abstain. That's right, United States of America, abstain. And so just a reminder, a couple cartoons here. This is Nelson Mandela, and remember, he was freed from jail after being in jail for 30 years, and he's going to become the first black president of South Africa, and so he's throwing away the signs. That cartoon was drawn, he passed away in 2013, so we had a big celebration of his life. And then over here, kind of an interesting cartoon, we've got, what's the capital of South Africa? So today's lesson's apartheid. What's the capital of South Africa? And this kid here says Tel Aviv. Anybody get the joke? Tel Aviv is the capital of South Africa. Anybody get the joke? Anybody? Anybody? You know what? I'm going to let you think about that. Okay. I think that's it. Be good, everybody. And we'll do this all again. Well, actually, I'm going to be in class next week. So, see you then. Be good.